Imran Rahman had a perfect life. Sana Rahman had no reason to be afraid, and Ayesha Rahman believed her family was unbreakable, until one quiet detail inside their home exposed a truth so dark it shattered everything they thought they knew. The Rahman family lived in a quiet street where every house looked similar, but theirs always stood out for its calm and order. The lawn was neatly trimmed, the windows were always clean, and the lights inside gave off a warm, peaceful glow every evening. People in the neighborhood often spoke about how perfect their life seemed. Nothing ever appeared out of place. Imran Rahman was known as a disciplined and responsible man. He worked as an accountant and followed a strict routine every day. He left for work at the same time each morning and returned home just before sunset. His movements were predictable, almost like clockwork. Sana, his wife, was admired for her kindness and gentle nature. She kept the house spotless and was always ready to help others in the community. Their daughter, Ayesha, was quiet but intelligent, often seen walking to school with her books held close to her chest. From the outside, their life looked simple and stable. There were no loud arguments, no sudden disturbances, no signs of trouble. Even during late hours, the house remained calm, with lights turning off at the same time each night. But behind this carefully maintained image, there were small details that no one paid attention to. Subtle changes that were easy to ignore. At first, they seemed harmless, almost invisible. Yet those unnoticed details would soon begin to form a pattern. And that pattern would quietly start to unravel the image of a perfect family. A few days after that quiet sense of unease began to settle in, Sana noticed something strange with her phone. It started with a single missed call from a number she didn't recognize. She thought it was a mistake and ignored it. Unknown numbers were common, and most of them meant nothing. But the next evening, the phone rang again. The number was different this time. It lasted only a second before stopping, leaving behind silence and confusion. Sana stared at the screen, unsure why it bothered her so much. There was no message, no explanation. Over the following days, the calls became more frequent. Sometimes they came late at night, other times in the early morning. Each time, the pattern was the same. One ring, then nothing. No voice, no sound, just an empty presence on the other end. Sana began to feel watched, though there was no clear reason for it. She started keeping her phone close at all times, checking it even when it didn't ring. Small habits changed without her realizing it. She double-checked the locks before going to bed. She closed the curtains earlier than usual. The peaceful routine of the house remained unchanged on the surface, but inside, a quiet tension began to grow. Sana couldn't explain it to anyone, not even to herself. It was just a feeling, faint but persistent, that something unseen was slowly moving closer. And with each silent call, that feeling became harder to ignore. One afternoon, Ayesha returned home earlier than usual after her classes were dismissed ahead of time. The street was unusually quiet, and the house looked exactly as it always did from the outside. Nothing seemed different. She unlocked the front door and stepped inside, expecting to hear the familiar sounds of movement or activity. Instead, the house felt still. As she walked down the hallway, she noticed something that immediately caught her attention. Her parents' bedroom door was closed. That alone was not strange, but when she tried the handle, it didn't move. The door was locked. This had never happened before. Ayesha paused, her hand still resting on the handle. She listened carefully, expecting to hear something from inside. There was nothing. No footsteps, no movement, no sound at all. The silence felt heavier than usual, almost unnatural. She glanced around the house. Her mother's shoes were still placed neatly near the entrance, exactly where they always were. This meant Sana was inside somewhere. Ayesha knocked lightly, then a little louder. There was still no response. The quiet continued, stretching longer than it should have. After a moment, she stepped back, unsure of what to think. She told herself there must be a simple explanation. Maybe her mother was resting or busy. Trying to ignore the uneasy feeling, Ayesha went to her room and began her homework. But her focus kept drifting. The image of the locked door stayed in her mind. It felt like something important had been hidden just out of sight. Across the street, An elderly man named Khalid spent most of his days near his front window. Watching the neighborhood had become part of his routine over the years. He noticed patterns in people's lives, the small details that others often ignored. To him, the Rahman family had always been predictable, almost perfectly so. But recently, that pattern had started to shift. Late one night, long after the street had gone quiet, he saw movement outside the Rahman house. Imran stepped out, closing the door carefully behind him. He moved slowly, as if trying not to make noise, then walked away into the darkness. Khalid found it unusual, but didn't think much of it first. Then it happened again, and again. The late-night departures became frequent, always at irregular hours, always alone. Imran, who once lived by a strict routine, now seemed to be moving outside it. Khalid also noticed something else. On some nights, after Imran had already left, a faint light would appear inside the house. It would flicker briefly in a room that should have been empty, then disappear just as suddenly. The old man began to feel a quiet sense of concern. These were not dramatic changes, but they didn't fit the image he had known for so long. Still, he said nothing. It wasn't his place to interfere, but he continued to watch. And with each passing night, the small irregularities became harder to ignore, slowly turning into something far more unsettling. The morning Sanaa disappeared began like any other. The house was quiet, the air still, and nothing seemed out of place at first glance. Ayesha woke up expecting to see her mother in the kitchen, preparing breakfast or moving through her usual routine. But the kitchen was empty. At first, it didn't feel alarming. Sanaa occasionally stepped out early for small errands. But as time passed, a strange feeling began to settle in. Her phone was lying on the table, untouched. Her bag was still in its usual place. Even her shoes had not moved from the doorway. There were no signs that she had planned to leave. When Imran returned home later, he reported her missing. His actions were measured and controlled. He provided information, answered questions, and remained composed throughout. To others, he appeared calm under pressure. But that calmness felt unusual given the situation. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. People gathered, whispering among themselves, trying to understand what could have happened. Volunteers organized searches, checking nearby streets and empty areas. Posters with Sanaa's picture began to appear on walls and poles. Days passed without any answers. Then weeks. The absence grew heavier with each passing day. Inside the house, everything remained exactly as Sanaa had left it, frozen in time. Ayesha noticed every small detail, every object that no longer had a purpose without her mother there. The unanswered questions began to build, and the silence of the house slowly turned into something far more disturbing. As weeks passed without progress, the investigation began to slow down. There were no witnesses, no clear leads, and no evidence pointing in any direction. The case risked being forgotten, reduced to another unsolved disappearance. But one officer decided to review everything again, focusing on the smallest details others had overlooked. The house was searched once more, this time with greater care. Every room was examined slowly, every surface checked with attention. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The furniture was in place, the floors were clean, and everything appeared untouched. Then something subtle caught the officer's eye. Near the edge of the bedroom floor, barely visible under the light, there was a faint scratch. It was thin and uneven, like something heavy had been dragged across the surface. It didn't match the otherwise perfect condition of a room. The officer paused and looked closer. The bed was moved slightly, revealing more of the mark. It extended further than expected, leading toward a specific spot on the floor. That small imperfection was enough to raise suspicion. A closer inspection revealed a hidden panel beneath the flooring. It was carefully designed to blend in, almost impossible to notice unless someone knew exactly where to look. When the panel was opened, the truth began to surface. Inside the concealed space were traces that should never have been there. Dark stains, faint but unmistakable, signs that something violent had taken place. The perfect home had been hiding something far darker beneath its surface. Once the hidden space was discovered, The entire direction of the investigation changed. What had once seemed like a missing person case now carried clear signs of something far more serious. The evidence found beneath the floor could not be ignored. Careful testing confirmed what the investigators feared. The stains belonged to Sanaa. Attention quickly turned to Imran. His calm and controlled behavior, which had once appeared strong, now felt unnatural. Investigators began to re-examine his routine, his movements, and the details surrounding the days before Sanaa disappeared. The late-night outings reported by the neighbor became important. The silent calls Sanaa had been receiving were also traced. Records showed that those calls came from prepaid numbers purchased over time. Each one had been used briefly and then discarded. The pattern suggested planning, not coincidence. When investigators followed the trail, it led back to Imran. The pieces began to connect in a disturbing way. The calls had created fear and confusion. The locked room now seemed less like an accident and more like a controlled moment. Everything pointed toward a carefully constructed situation designed to isolate Sanaa. Further digging revealed that Imran had been hiding parts of his life from everyone around him. Financial records showed irregularities. There were secrets he had managed to keep buried for years. As pressure increased, the image of the perfect family completely collapsed, revealing a reality built on control, deception, and a plan that had gone too far to be undone. After the truth came to light, everything changed for those connected to the case. Imran was taken into custody, and the evidence against him left little room for doubt. The careful image he had built over the years disappeared almost instantly, replaced by the reality of what had been hidden beneath the surface. The community that once admired him now struggled to understand how someone so ordinary could carry such darkness. The house, once filled with routine and quiet comfort, became a place no one wanted to look at for too long. Its walls held memories that could no longer be ignored. What once symbolized stability now stood as a reminder of how easily appearances could be trusted without question. Ayesha's life shifted in ways she could never have expected. She was placed under the care of relatives, far from the home she had always known. The small details she once noticed but didn't understand began to make sense, though the truth behind them carried a weight that would stay with her for years. The investigation eventually closed, but its impact did not fade. People in the neighborhood became more aware, more cautious, less certain about what they thought they knew about others. In the end, it was not a dramatic event that exposed everything. It was something small, almost invisible, a single scratch on the floor. That one detail broke the illusion, revealing that perfection can sometimes hide the darkest truths.